working in both banking and insurance, and so she's really experienced, and trust me, she knows her onion. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Samira. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello everyone. Hi.
Okay, so for this session, we're supposed to have one more person join us. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it due to logistics issues. But nonetheless, we promise to have a very engaging session because what we really want to talk about is what it takes to build a sustainable business in Nigeria. And the essence of this, right? Like, let me give you guys an overview. So, what we do at Business Insider Africa is we try our possible best to capture what is going on in the business landscape, and we try to take it in each of the thriving and emerging markets in Africa, right? And today we are fortunate to have people who have excelled, in the Nigerian market, and we want to get, the juice. We want to get the secret. We want to get what we believe would be helpful to the upcoming entrepreneurs, as well as people who are already business owners, learning about how they can grow their business and have a sustainable business on the long term. So that is why we have put this session together to arm aspiring entrepreneurs with practical tips to ensure survival beyond the current global challenges. This includes SMEs, startups, and every aspect of the business. So let me start with Ifeoluwa. You're leading one of the top startups, health tech startups right now in Africa. And although I have a little knowledge about your background and how you started, I would really like for you to give the audience the background journey of what led to you starting Health Tracker.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to meet everyone. Um, so my background is, we all know we're in Africa, right? Every African parent, at least in our own days, wanted their children to study either medicine or law or engineering. So, the prestigious courses. Yeah, so I wasn't different. My parents wanted me to go for medicine because, again, I was good at science. I understood logic and all that. So, you know, JAMP and all the other things happened, and I ended up studying biochemistry. I know what they promise you, oh, just go in and then you cross later. It didn't work. So fortunately, by the time I was, at my third level in school, I knew that I didn't want to be on the clinical side of medicine anyway, so it was perfect that I didn't do medicine. And I remember that my internship was at UCH in Ibadan. I was at the chemical pathology lab, and that was my first introduction into diagnostics, into core clinical medicine. Again, by the time I was done with school, I was 100% sure that I wanted to be on the business side of things, right? Unfortunately, I got my first role in a bootstrapped e-commerce company. I say that it was ahead of Jumia and Konga actually at that time. It was very strange. I could not explain what we were doing to anybody at the time. Like, people are going to come online, they'll buy stuff. So won't people go to the physical location? Now it feels weird, but it was actually a thing at that time. And I spent close to 4 years in that company, basically trying to figure out how do you bring people online to buy from a platform and then bring merchants on that same platform to also sell. Fast forward about 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago actually, I then landed a role leading marketing at one of the multinational medical diagnostics company in the country. And my love for healthcare came back, right? It felt like welcome home, welcome home. So it was at that role that it occurred to me that not much had changed in healthcare, especially from a diagnostics point of view. And I can talk for the whole day about diagnostic and how important it is and how everybody should know their numbers, right? Again, I experienced it firsthand when I lost my own father to something he could easily have detected. And I think that's what makes it really worse. You know, when you can prevent something and then the worst then happens just because we didn't know on time. And that coincided with rather COVID happening, right? So I lost my dad November 2019. COVID happened in December. I was still grieving. Then we had to be home. I had more time to think. And it became a thing, really, because I knew that I wanted to be part of the solution. So for context, 70% of all medical decisions are driven by diagnostics, right? That means if you go to a doctor today, the chances that the doctor is going to send you to go do a test is high. Because a doctor needs to understand what's going on. He needs to see your blood test. Is it your cholesterol? Is it your liver? Is it your kidney function? Is it malaria? Is it typhoid? What exactly is the problem? Then a doctor makes a decision on how to treat. But most of the time, we don't seek healthcare until there's a problem. So when we see headache, we go buy analgesic. When we see anything wrong with us, we just want to treat that symptom. But what exactly is the cause of it, right? And I think that's where, a lot of work and education needs to happen. So in my own case, it was my father that had that. So apparently he's been treating symptoms. And then the root cause was still there, and we had no idea. And suddenly he slumped, and that was it, right? So it was during my time just thinking about why on earth would we have, a population of young, bright, educated, people, and then we still go into life this way. I had the experience, I'd worked in startups, I'd worked in e-commerce company. I knew that I wanted to be part of the solution, and we were looking for how do we make medical diagnostics accessible such that even if you're 20-year-old, you know your numbers, you know the things that you should look at. If I know that my cholesterol is high, I'll make different decisions about my lifestyle. And that's basically, how I got here.
Thank you very much. So Samira, quickly, if you could give us a bit of context about your background, and we just jump right in, from the position of the Chief Risk Officer, how would you define sustainability in business using your experience as a case study?
Thanks, Victor. Great question. Um, like Ife, I started out, wanting to be a doctor as well. I wanted to do pediatrics. I ended up studying microbiology, so very close. But yeah, after university, as we all know, the real hustle starts, particularly when you stop, collecting pocket money and whatnot. And you wake up and you smell the coffee. On my own part, I knew I did not want to get stuck doing the sort of routine lab investigations. So I appreciate the diagnostics. But I was more excited about things like research, going into the unknown, uncharted waters. And since we don't do a lot of that in Nigeria, I sort of tried to channel my energy and my curiosity in other directions. And that's kind of how I ended up in financial services. First in an audit firm, and then I got an opportunity to work with Guarantee Trust Bank, and then with AXA Mansard, and now with Sparkle. All right, so for the better part of my years of experience, yes, I have spent them in risk management, so managing risks. Now, how do I tie that to business sustainability? Without going, too, technical and, trying to make it sound like it is something out, dropped from the moon. Everyone who starts a business wants that business, ideally, to outlast them, to leave them, right? Even in basic accounting, for example, there is a principle of a going concern, meaning that you want your business to continue to go. You account for your books in such a way that there is a mindset that you want your business to continue to run. So you do the history, you do the present, but you're also planning for the future of that business. And that is so in tandem with risk management, because risk management is about taking care of the uncertainties, addressing anything that is an uncertainty around an ambition, an objective, something that you have. So if you're a business, and I usually like to give the example, very simple example of, some of our entrepreneurs I call them instapreneurs now, on Instagram, right? So we've got people, who are selling their wigs, who are selling their makeup, their lipstick, and things like that. And that young chap or that young lady or group of people who are coming together to do that have an ambition, they have an objective, whether it's to make money, whether it's to take care of today's needs, on their own side as little entrepreneurs, or it's an ambition to be the next, it's a curriculum, we call it, or, some other big names, right, in terms of wig production. Whether that is the objective or it is simple as making a little money to sustain themselves, there will be uncertainties, right? What is the uncertainty around that business? And everything you're doing to manage those uncertainties become risk management. So in a way, risk management itself is about making sure that your business remains sustainable, in simple terms.
Thank you very much. Ife, I have a question. Can I call you Ife or Ife Oluwa? Which do you prefer? Ife is fine. So, from the very moment you felt the decision to start Health Tracker to, growing the company to where you are currently, I have two questions, right? First of all, for people who are looking to follow in your footsteps, how can they start, right? Especially in Nigeria of today, where there is rigorous amount of paperwork and so many things that you just have to do, CAC, all of this. What are the complications on that aspect? And then the second question that I have for you is, what particular decision would you say you have taken since you started the business, and that decision has set a trajectory for the future of Health Tracker to be sustainable?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, I would like to approach it by encouraging people to keep moving. And I say that with, with a bit of a sprinkle of motivation. And what that means is, yeah, the country is hard. Like, I was telling her that to exist in Lagos today, like, you simply are existing, even if you are not working, is hard, right? Because even to eat, like, you want to buy food, you can finish eating and your POS does not go, the payment does not go through, and you have to wash plates. It's just, that's the life we have, we are in right now. So you are then considering starting a business. Just know you're already doing incredibly well, right? Your head is in the right space already. What you need to do is just ensure that you push through those difficulties that definitely will come through. And the first thing to do is look at what is the most simplest way. Again, that's tautology. What's the simplest way of launching your idea that keeps you moving, right? So you know how they say it's the biggest, the ugliest, is that what they say? Ugliest frog first, yeah? Sometimes it doesn't work like that, because if you see really ugly frogs, you will not touch it, right? So what you may want to do, instead of building that mobile app, how about just starting a WhatsApp group and putting people there and saying, this is what I am selling. Can you be buying? That gives you confidence. By the time 1 or 5, 6, 10 people buys, it gives you the confidence to say, okay, you know what, I have an idea here. It looks like people will be interested in what I have to offer, as opposed to, oh, I have to build a mobile app, right? That feels big. That feels grand, right? So what you want to do is quickly prove your idea, quickly start what's the simplest channel I can use to start this idea, and then, you can just keep moving. From there on, you can then add on and say, okay, you know what, instead of a mobile app, let's move it to websites. Can you even use a simple Google form for now? What is the simplest idea, channel? What are the simplest things you can do that keeps you moving? I think the key word here is the movement. You must never stop moving. Every single day, what's the additional value, what's the additional activity that you're adding to your idea that keeps it moving? So once you are able to do that, you realize that you can look back 1 week and you actually can see, something has moved here, something has shifted. That helps, it tricks your brain into thinking you can take on more, right? And then you realize that, okay, you know what, I'm not where I used to be anymore. It's getting better. In terms of like the second thing, so I mean, that would even help you. So let's say you want to do even your CSE registration, and you're thinking already, oh, I need to get a lawyer, I need to get all those things. Ladies and gentlemen, start a business name. You can literally do that by your own or in the website. It costs less, and it'll come out maybe in like 48 hours. I know because that's what I did, right? And do that. Have that in your hand. You use it to open an account. Leave it. So that when people reach out to you and say, oh, I'm actually interested in this, they still take you seriously because you have a corporate account, yeah? That's the first thing you want to sort, right? So you have that. And then you build that for a couple more days, weeks, months, before you then start to hire, okay, now I'm ready for a proper company, yeah? If you approach it that way, it kind of just gets you moving until you get to the point where, even you believe more in yourself because you can see the traction, you can see all that. In terms of like the second thing on what I have done, I would say it's the same thing. I truly believe that every single day we need to move closer to our goals, right? What am I doing today that keeps me moving every day? And it's from everything. It is from, every single day I must talk to someone about my business. Every single day my team must reach out, my business development team must reach out to one of our potential customers. Our product team must have something to show for today. What are we moving? What needle are we moving every day? So in my own, the way I've run and done the business, it is the bias for action, the bias for execution, the bias for movement.
Thank you very much for that wonderful answer. Samira, back to you. While you were answering the first question, you made reference to, the rise of social media entrepreneurs, right? And I believe one thing that is really common now is a lot of people, once they want to start a business, social media is definitely the first channel that they use to amplify this business. So, from your position, having worked in the finance sector as well as the insurance sector, what would you say are some of the risks, to starting a business that many entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs can avoid?
Thank you. I mean, generally speaking, there are many risks to business or to starting a business. And I mean, off the top of my head, I can say depending on the type of business that you're trying to start will also determine the magnitude of different kinds of risks. So for example, if you're starting a business where you're not really out there, all the time in the media, you don't have such a huge dependency on media presence, you may have a lower reputational risk, for example, than a business that has a huge, following on social media. So, for example, you have 1 million followers. It goes without saying that if something happened, in fact, if your CEO were to cough, that could, you know what I mean, be an uncertainty depending on how he coughed, who did he cough at, and things like that. But generally speaking, I think you need to consider the risks of things like your product will be very, very key. Whatever product you're designing, I go back to the example of my Instapreneurs. I have some great folks that I know, who are doing things like shea butter, who are doing things like lipstick, all natural products, right? You want to address core risks within that product. What are the uncertainties that can come up with that product? Is there a possibility that someone could use that product and end up with rashes? Have you gone through the valid checks and balances that are required by, for example, a NAFDAC, right? Depending on, the scale and the size of your business. You might even need to go beyond just the requirements of NAFDAC, right? If, for example, you want to export that business, you want to make sure that, your production standards are top-notch. You also have the risks of infrastructure, right? So in Nigeria, again today, that same example, what sort of infrastructure do you need to produce? Maybe it's shea butter that you beat and you make it light and fluffy, and people really love how soft it feels on their skin. The equipment that you're going to use to do that, the infrastructure, how about the electricity to power it? Or are you going to use solar? Are you going to, so there are risks around the infrastructure that you need to put on ground in that kind of business. And if you're in a tech business, for example, maybe your infrastructure is, are you going to be on your premises or are you going to put something on the cloud? So the example that you gave about somebody wanting to develop an app, right? What are the risks that if you set up a WhatsApp group, what if WhatsApp decides to change their terms and conditions tomorrow, right? And you can WhatsApp no longer allows you to administer the group. What if someone reports your WhatsApp group and it gets blocked, right? Because your product is built on that platform of WhatsApp or on the cloud or wherever you are, you need to have, you need to consider those uncertainties around that, right? Sometimes what if even your phone, right, that you're using for that WhatsApp group gets, stolen? You have somewhere where you have backed up, the contact. Imagine you have a WhatsApp group that has 1,000 customers already, do you have a backup to that? So there are various kinds of risks. There's people risks as your business starts to grow, and one time it's only you and maybe your brother, your sister, and you're very committed to it. And then now the business is a little bit bigger and you need to hire, a few people. Maybe it's a sales girl, maybe it's a developer who will now put you on a website. There are risks as well associated with the fact that now you have to depend on people, you have to delegate certain things. Are those people going to do those things to the quality that you want your product to have? So there are a myriad of risks, but depending on your type of business. And sometimes, when we say risk management, right, people usually think that, oh, you have to have someone like me in your business who will be looking at those kinds of things. Honestly, sometimes it's just about sitting down to brainstorm and asking yourself, what if? What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And the fact that you're even doing that, by the time you're answering those questions of what if, you would have extracted some of your risks, and hopefully, in addressing those what ifs, you would have managed some of those risks.
Interesting. I have a follow-up question, but I'll come back to that. Right now, getting to, how crazy it is navigating the business landscape here in Nigeria. One of the challenges that aspiring entrepreneurs as well as entrepreneurs have is in the area of funding, right? And that's a very critical question. How do I get the money to start my business? You mentioned something about movement in the beginning of your speech, and that's a roadblock for some people, right? In terms of trying to pull the resources together to actually move forward to the next level. So, in your position, how did you start Health Tracker? Did you start with your own money first and then gradually scale? Or, yeah, that's something that I think would be really interesting to know about.
Yes. So definitely, I started with my money first. In my own case, I'd worked, for quite a bit, so obviously had money saved. So yeah, I could, take the risk. And I think, it also helps when people know that you've also put in your own money, you've bootstrapped, you've committed your own resources here as well. The point is, yes, I did bootstrap, and I bootstrapped for about I think for about 6 months while we were trying to build the product. So, I mean, like everybody who wants to start a tech business, it had to be a mobile app. So yeah, it had developers, and that's when you quickly realize that those people cost a arm and a leg. And, I definitely had to pour almost all my life savings on them. But then, thankfully, just about the time when, we're running out of money, I then randomly saw, a tweet, I think, about some ladies, two ladies who had started a fund. And they were looking at, ridiculously early stage companies. And I began to stalk them. And I mean stalk like, not cute stalking. It's all those freakishly stalking kind of thing, right? Which meant, obviously I went to all their Instagram. There's a way you can stalk people where you know their history. And I know how to do those things. I can obsess over things, right? Like I will go and check all their followers list. Who do I know there? Who knows them? Like I can very detailed. Because I'm trying to look, do I have any familiar person that, all those kind of things. And did that while praying that, I catch their attention before I run out of money. And they announced that, we're taking applications now. We're taking pitches now. And then I sent in my pitch. Unfortunately, they came back and, no. So they came back and put a Calendly link. And the closest date was like 2 months or 3 months out. It looked like everybody in Lagos or in Africa went on that same link. And, before you know it, they are taking all the close dates for the interview or the pitch chats, right? So, but then I had a friend who told me and said, if what you need to do to get an investor's attention is to show them that there's something worth looking at, right? So what I did was, anytime there was any update about the business, I would send an email and say, guess what? This is what we're doing now. We actually just landed this deal. I just acquired my first customer. I just, and all. And guess what? It worked. Because randomly, one of those days, I got an email back and they said, actually, we have a slot open. Do you want us to chat in the next few days? Of course, we have to chat soon. And that was how I got my first meeting with them. Coincidentally, they also became our first check, right? So the more coincidental thing is the name of the fund is called First Check Africa. So, and that was how we got our first funding. It came just right on time when, the money was drying up. And yeah, that was how I raised my first funding. It was easier. I wouldn't say it was a lot easier, but, I remember clearly that when I got the email, the money had not even landed in the account. I just got the email that they were going to fund us. And I literally sat down and I was crying. Of course, and it was just because somebody else outside of me and, of course, the people who are my friends and family who don't have a choice than to support me actually, put their money where their mouth is. People say that, oh, wow, that's such a fantastic idea. Oh, wow, that's great. But would they put their money down? Their hard-earned money and say, we believe in you, run it, we'll back you. And I think that definitely set a trajectory for where we are today, right? So for anyone in that position, and that's why, my point about movement is important, right? Because guess what? Except you have an MIT degree or you're a white male from Stanford or Harvard, it's not exactly, going to be the most fun ride raising money, right? It's just what it is. So you have to be able to think outside the box and ask yourself, why will anybody look at my email and respond to it? So what you want to highlight, as I said, is what traction do you have? What's the quality of idea? Some people want to see the team behind it. So you want to highlight the most interesting thing about yourself, about what you're doing, so that you can get people actually taking a second look at, at what you've put out there. So, the key thing is ensure that you have something that catches the attention of a potential investor. Another thing I learned along the way, fundraising is a numbers game. Numbers mean that if you want 2, 3 investors who are going to drop the money, you probably would have to speak to close to 20 or 30, right? So the more investor you speak to, then the higher the chances, right? So you have, and all of these things, I'm saying it casually, but there's actually a science to it in some way, right? Where you have to have your list, you have to have which one of these people are warm leads, which one of them are cold, right? How can I move cold leads to warm leads, and all of that, right? But at the early stage, a simpler way would be to find angel investors who already know you, who believe in you. So for example, if you have people who have worked with you in Sparkle, and you know them, you know their work ethics, right? And it's time for them to branch out and do what they want, what they've been dreaming of. You see the idea, you know this person, you know that this person is an execution based and says, I just need $5,000 from you. You probably will consider it if you have the money, right? And say, okay, I can bet on this person. So do you have people like that around you who can bet on you, who knows how well you work and how passionate you can be about an idea and grow things, yeah? And again, I know that, I'm saying a lot of things, right? But this is why it's also important, even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur right now, whatever you're doing, your job, it is important that you put out your best self, right? Because you never know. In the future, maybe you land on a multi-million idea and it's time to execute, but you need money. Guess what? It's the people who know you who will vouch for you, right? Everybody who have raised money, they tell you there's something called due diligence. Nobody gives anybody money without due diligence. They will call the people that you have worked with 10 years ago and to ask them how how is this person like? If you have run away with somebody's money before, that's the end. Right. So I would say that, what you want to do is ensure that you put your best self out, right? Of course, be a good person first, but then also have good reputation and then do the work. You are going to have to reach out. You are going to have to stalk people. You are going to have to draw up, your own strategy of reaching out to investors.
Okay. Just a follow-up question to that very quickly. At what point should entrepreneurs consider fundraising in the business? Is it compulsory or is it better to bootstrap along the way till probably you're profitable? But at what point should, entrepreneurs start considering the option of raising funds?
I think it depends, yeah. So it depends on the kind of business that you're building. There are businesses that you can bootstrap, obviously, right? If you want to start maybe like a e-commerce company, even a mobile app, right? Nowadays, there are a lot of ways to build a mobile app that won't cost you a arm and a leg. If there is any way you can bootstrap, you have money, you have rich parents, you have rich uncles and aunties who believe in you, who like you, get their money, build, right? So that you have enough traction, you have developed your idea to some extent before going to look for external funding. And that is because it helps you to keep a lot more of your equity, right? Again, I can digress and talk a little bit about how, the money that you hear and see people raise is not free. Nobody gives you free money. That means they're owning a part of your business, yeah? So if your business is at the earliest stage, you've not figured things out, they know. And they're going to take a huge chunk of it, right? Because they are helping you figure things out. So for you as well, you probably want to keep, a big part of your business because you're going to be working hard on it for the, for the next few years at least. So it would be advisable as much as possible. You want to hold out on taking external funding until you have proven the business to some extent and you can put a real value to the business. On the other hand, there are people who are building biotech that even develop the product itself will probably cost you millions of dollars from like the first go, right? Except you're a trust fund kid, you probably don't have that money. So it would depend what kind of business are you building. If you can, I would say bootstrap as far as you can before taking on outside capital. You may realize that your customers' revenue may actually keep you going. There's a popular company I know today, I won't mention the name. I'm usually so inspired by them. They've never taken outside company funding, and they're doing so well. They do not need to, and it's a good thing. And sometimes some people raise just once and never raise again because the business is good. It helps you as a founder to stay committed to just building and building because you know that you own a bigger part of it. And you can focus on revenue, not funding, to grow your business. Revenue to grow your business.
Thank you very much. Samira, I have one final question for you, and it's still about the risks of doing business in Nigeria. What advice do you have for people who are starting out? What are the risks that you think they should prioritize first? And how should they take advantage of that to, grow their business and make it sustainable in Nigeria? Obviously, there are a lot of factors, right? External factors, internal factors that we all know. But from the position of a chief risk officer, what is your advice for people who want to start up, and how can they, take advantage of this to make their business sustainable in Nigeria today?
I think those are some of the three items that I'd mentioned before. Your product is obviously very, very key. Whatever it is that, whether it's a service or it's something that you actually produce, that is your product. That becomes the bread and butter of the business. So how well you do it, right, hopefully, will keep people coming back to that product. Sometimes you hear of, people who will say to you things like, if it's not this, item made by, they're not buying any other one, right? So there is a certain value that that product, gives to them that keeps them coming back. And that ties into what Ife was saying about guaranteeing your revenue, right? Because if people are going to keep coming back for your product, then it guarantees that you will have revenue. Now, closely tied together with the product is maybe in a place like Nigeria, the service around that product. So, for example, there are stores there are instapreneurs that you have experiences with who are simply doing e-commerce. So the actual product that they are selling is not their product, right? So you have some of them selling maybe things like makeup, some of them selling things like perfume. So the actual product you buy from them is not their product, but the service that they give you, there's a certain wowness to it, the way they respond to you, the way they, follow up with you, make sure you get your delivery, not the one that when you buy, you are the one who will call 1,000,001 times to get your delivery. So that service then becomes a product. So it can be either or both. Like I said earlier as well, the infrastructure is also a huge deal, especially in Nigeria. We know how, it goes without saying, some of our experiences in the last 2 or 3 weeks around, fuel scarcity, around, power and things like that, that already gives you a huge, idea of the kind of risks that any business needs to manage. In fact, even if you are a personal business, like Ife was saying earlier, so you don't have a business, but you are just a person, right? In Nigeria today, you have to manage those kinds of risks, right? I remember somebody saying that, they came out at to the bus stop, and there were just no buses, right? Because it was one of the first days that we really started to experience the heat of this fuel scarcity. So for that person, even if it's just a visit from their home to their sister's home, that day, there is a risk, attached to that objective. Next, I would say is still people. Do you have the right kind of, support in your business, the right kind of structure, right? And then maybe last but not the least, and this is particularly very important for entrepreneur businesses, is governance. And sometimes this is what determines whether the business will outlive itself or even outlive, the person or not. How well do you govern the business? So yes, today you might just be a little entrepreneur, but even things like keeping your financial record, keeping details of your business. Because the day that serious investors approach you, like if I said, you've got to have something to show them, right? And that will come back to your governance, how well you have managed the business. Have you been disciplined in terms of the finances? Have you been disciplined in terms of, your record keeping, those sorts of things?
So one final advice to round up this session would be.
My final advice would be perseverance. Perseverance, and especially as a risk manager, because risk management is not something you do one time and then you stop and say, oh, I have managed the risk, right? It's an ongoing process. It's something you do every single day as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, right? So I would say definitely perseverance, because there will be days when you wake up and you feel like not recording the sale that you made, right? There will be days when something will come up and you may feel like telling that developer that just do it. Let's just let it slide. But that may just be the day when you need to persevere and make sure that it is done properly. So I would say perseverance. Perseverance can be really challenging, especially in our current environment.
So, if one final word to you, to the listeners, aspiring entrepreneurs, I know you've mentioned movement. I will keep that in my pocket for myself. But what final advice do you have that you think people can take away from this session and hold on to start their next business?
Okay, so this is going to sound like aspire to perspire, right? But I think the one thing is, see, just get up and do it, right? If you have been ruminating over that idea for long, nothing is going to happen. You're never going to know if it would work or not until you get up and just do it. Yeah? And of course, it ties to the movement, right? If you get up and do it, you then do not stop moving until you have proven the idea out. Or maybe the other way as well, right? Because sometimes your first idea may not be the successful one, but you would have proven that, okay, actually that doesn't work. But you will never know. So I would say, and I encourage everyone, just get started. Do it. Register the company. Start the business. And if it's career for you, take the course. Go for your master's. Whatever it is that gets you moving from where you are to what your dreams really is, please get up and do it. And ask for all the help you can get on the way.
Thank you very much. This concludes the end of our session. And I would like you guys to please give a round of applause to our speakers once again. If any one of you have any personal questions, feel free to reach out to them before they leave. And yeah, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you very much once again. My name is Victor, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.